Wild Kingdom has gotten me in the water. It has gotten me diving. It has gotten me snorkeling. It has gotten me in marine spaces, in deep ocean, deep open ocean and beaches and, diving into river systems, all over the place. And so I am getting this whole second education of learning about all the other wild animals that I didn't deeply study as an academic. And now I get to do it for work. So really, I truly believe that the public is benefiting from this show, but also know that I am benefiting a whole lot too. Just my brain is just buzzing all the time with new info.
Hey there, Podcast Aquanauts. It's your host, Casey here. When you were growing up, assuming you're not one of our younger listeners and still in the process of doing so, did you watch many nature documentaries? I know I did. BBC series hosted by the inimitable Sir David Attenborough, such as Planet Earth or Blue Planet, were some of my favorites. Personalities like Jeff Corwin and Steve Irwin became familiar, beloved tour guides to wild animals and wild spaces. For generations, the hosts of nature series have served a vital role in inspiring an appreciation for and love of the natural world among viewers who might not otherwise experience exotic species or locales. One of the 800-pound gorillas of the TV nature series world has got to be Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. During the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, this legendary NBC program led by Marlon Perkins whisked viewers all over the country every Sunday night to delight in moments of wild drama. In 2023, Wild Kingdom was revived with co-leads Peter Gros and Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant in the driver's seat. In this episode, we chat with Dr. Rae about fulfilling her lifelong dream of becoming a nature show host, her academic audaciousness, and how important she considers her role in inspiring future generations of nature lovers. That's enough for me, though, don't you think? It's time to take a walk on the wild side with Dr. Rae. On with the podcast. Thank you for joining us on the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant, who is the co-host of the Emmy Award-nominated Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom Protecting the Wild on NBC, as well as the host and creator of the Going Wild podcast, and, as I think we'll probably get into in the course of today's discussion, a very well-pedigreed scientist. Dr. Rae, thank you so much for joining us on this show.
Well, it is just amazing to be here, especially after having just recently visited your aquarium in person.
That's right. So that happened at this point a month and a half ago.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
No, it was more than that. It was
2 months ago. It was 2 months ago. Yeah, the whole summer has flown by.
That's so true. We're recording this at the tail end of August. So what were you doing when you came back here, or came down here, I guess, to the aquarium here in Chattanooga?
That was a really fun adventure, little mini adventure. I was representing Wild Kingdom because although we are a television show, we also are out and about in the community. So it was a partnership with Tennessee Aquarium, Wild Kingdom, Mutual of Omaha, and an organization called Washed Ashore to really just bring attention to the local waterways in and around Chattanooga, do some trash cleanups, and also talk about the impact of plastic pollution on the local waterways and the freshwater aquatic animals that live there. So it was this really cool day where I was literally out on a riverbank picking up trash. And then, the next thing I knew, I was at the aquarium, engaging with young kids who are at a summer camp and talking to them about all these great animals.
That's awesome. I'm sure that you probably influenced some of those kids. And I think we'll probably be talking today about influence both for yourself and also your role as an influencer, because as I mentioned, as the co-host of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom Protecting the Wild, is it okay if I just call it Protecting the Wild for sake of brevity?
Well, if you're going to abbreviate it, which I do all the time, call it Wild Kingdom.
All right. So as the co-host of Wild Kingdom, obviously you do probably influence quite a few people. And I do want to talk about influence. So as I mentioned, most people are probably familiar with you through Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, which you and Peter Gros began co-hosting when the show was brought back in 2023. And I want to dive a little bit before actually I get into the TV show. I do want to talk a little bit about your credentials as a scientist, because I think the science came before the show. So I think it makes sense to start there. So what was the root of your interest in science? Where did it start, and what was the thing that sparked your curiosity with the natural world?
So I am one of those people who, when I was a kid, I knew what I wanted to do as a career, but I did not know that it was science. So when I was a little kid, I really wanted to be a nature show host. believe it or not. So I'm
Really?
coming to you today as a nature show host, and I'm one of those rare people who actually like, always knew what they wanted to do and then kind of figured out how to do it. But I wanted to be a nature show host. I loved watching nature shows as a kid, wildlife shows, and the people that I knew that went to faraway places and learned about wild animals in the wild were nature show hosts. I didn't know that there were other people that did that, right? Those other people like didn't show up on TV. They weren't visible to me. This is the late 80s, early 90s. And so I say all that to say I didn't know that there was a science to learning about wild animals, to saving them, to designing conservation for them for many, many years. I thought, like, gosh, there's only 5 people in the world who work with wild animals. And it's these guys on the nature shows, these Australian and British nature show hosts. And so it was actually when I went to college and, was saying to my professors, hey, what do I major in? Because I want to be a nature show host. They guided me towards environmental science. It's when I realized, oh my goodness, there's a science to this. I grew up very urban. I loved being urban. Lived in big cities all of my childhood and adolescence, and my family did not recreate in nature. So we didn't take trips to national parks or state parks. We didn't go camping or hiking. To this day, 40 years later, I've never been to a national park with a member of my family. I've never gone hiking or camping, with a member of my family. And I say that because I had an incredible childhood, an incredible urban childhood. Sometimes there's this idea that because I work in the outdoors and because I work in wildlife, I believe that everyone should spend time in the outdoors and everyone should spend time with wildlife. And I really think that people should find happiness where they find it. So, my urban upbringing was exactly right. And at the same time, it limited my understanding of the different careers that were related to nature. So higher education is where I found that information. So getting to college, asking the right questions is where I realized, like, oh my gosh, there's these teams of people that are kind of invisible that spend all their time outside, that spend all of their time learning about wild animals, that try to fix the problems that we have in the environment. So once I learned that science was a pathway into kind of the purposeful work that I wanted to do with wildlife, I was very practical. I thought, oh, I'm much more likely to be a scientist than I am to be a nature show host. and the work I figured was very similar. If I get to live in amazing, nature spaces and, you know, learn about wild animals and make progress on protecting them, that's what I wanted to do as a nature show host. And that's what I'd like to do as a scientist. So it was not easy for me to be in academia. I mean, like, higher education is really challenging, but it seemed like there was a path that I could see towards careers with wildlife. And I really took that path. I didn't lose sight of my goal to be a nature show host, but I got really quickly, really easily excited about being a scientist.
I want to talk about your scientific work, and I should go ahead and say that you say that academia is difficult. You didn't make it any easier for yourself, I think, by going to the schools that you went to. You've got just I was mining your website for some of your bio, and I mean you went to Emory University. That's where you got a bachelor's in environmental studies. And then you went to Yale, which I hear that's a pretty good school, where you got a master's in ecology and evolution. And then you got a doctorate in ecology and evolution from Columbia University, which again, those are not party schools. Those are not schools that you just ease your way into. So you definitely put yourself to a challenge. Do you find that even though you didn't necessarily have this connection with the natural world in terms of experiencing it, did you feel like a lack growing up? Did you feel like you wanted to do those things and there just wasn't the opportunity to do it? I mean, how did you satisfy that need in yourself to feel that connection with the natural world without making those trips to the national parks, without going out and doing some of those things that you mentioned?
It's so interesting how you phrased that, because I'm realizing, like, oh, I haven't thought of it that way. I don't want to kind of oversimplify, but as a kid and as a young person, I really believed what I saw on TV. And again, I was obsessed with nature shows, obsessed with them. They were my favorite thing to watch, more than cartoons, more than, like sitcoms. That's what I wanted to watch. And I loved the magazines, right? The National Geographic magazines, the Ranger Rick magazines, like just any wildlife content I could get. I loved it. And at the same time, on those shows, in those magazines, and all of the nature and wildlife media, I wasn't seeing kids and families. I wasn't seeing teenagers, right? I was seeing like middle-aged white men from, different parts of the world doing this work. So there was never a time in my upbringing that I thought like, oh, I'm behind on this, like I wasn't seeing the journey of these experts into their level of expertise. I think if I assumed, I thought like they grew up, they left home, they went to college, they learned about wild animals, and then they got these careers. So I actually had like, it's one of those things like, it's not like I had people around me that were going on trips, camping trips with their families. Like I really like did not, as an urban, you know, I know this is audio, but like as an urban Black millennial, like woman and as an urban Black kid, my world was what my family showed me and what my community showed me. And so I did not, and I'm really glad I didn't realize that I was potentially missing out on experience in the outdoors. When I did realize it though, was when I was in college, when I was at Emory University and I was in environmental science classes and I was loving them. But I was looking around the room and realizing like, wait, I think everyone else who's in class here is pursuing environmental studies because they have all these experiences in the outdoors. They've fallen in love with nature through experience with nature, through time spent in nature. And I realized, gosh, I think I'm the only person here who's never been outside. Like I've never seen a wild animal. I don't have stories of pitching a tent, like I don't have a favorite hike. And so in college, pretty quickly I realized, you know what? I believe that I love this, but I kind of want to put that to the test because I love this work in theory, but I've never actually done it. I've never actually been there. So I found a study abroad program, and I thought I'm going to find the like most outdoorsy, most wildlife, rugged study abroad program that exists, and I'm going to enroll in it and just go head first to really try to see whether I'm right, like whether this career path is right for me. And my junior year, the first semester of my junior year of college, I did find a program. It was also the cheapest program I could find, which was helpful. And it was a study abroad program through the School for Field Studies, which still exists today. And it was a semester long wildlife management program in southern Kenya.
Wow.
And so, it was one of those programs where they were like, please don't bring a lot. Like if you can fit everything in one duffel bag that you could carry yourself, like that's perfect because you are on your own. There's no pavement where we're going. We're going to be living in thatched roof huts and, like you're going to be sitting around a campfire. And this was 2005. So it was kind of pre-internet, before the internet and of course before cellular service in rural Kenya. And I flew off to East Africa. And the day I landed was my first day seeing a wild animal and putting on hiking boots and pitching a tent. I was 20 years old.
What animal was it?
I wish I could say it was, an elephant or a giraffe or something, but the first animal that I saw from the car as we were driving, down the road from Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, to our field site, hours south, it was a secretary bird.
Oh,
and
really?
A lot of people haven't heard of a secretary bird, but I implore you to look it up. A secretary bird is this huge bird, big. They can be 5 feet tall. And so you can see them from a distance on the landscape and they walk around the landscape and they have these big, long beaks. And from a distance, they absolutely look like a velociraptor. And so they're just walking, and you look and you're like, what in the world is that human sized dinosaur? That was my first wild animal.
I'm not going to dig too deep into your postgraduate work because a lot of the information I got on your background comes from your website, which is raewyngrant.com. And postgraduate, you specialized in studying coastal ecology in Central California along the coast and also human carnivore interactions. I need to know a little bit more about how you homed in on large carnivores because, I mean, a lot of people, you hear stories, or we hear stories, I guess, here at the aquarium all the time about people who want to be a marine biologist because they want to work with, dolphins or whales or sharks. And those are kind of like the big cats and the bears of the sea. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of our work here at the aquarium, a lot of our scientists, who I guess you probably met while you were here, a lot of our work is focused on these really small 2-3 inch long fish or other animals that maybe are less celebrated, less naturally charismatic. How do you land kind of like the gold star gig of the academic world, the research world, of working with these incredibly charismatic animals that people just kind of naturally feel this attachment to because they're big and they're furry, and they remember reading about them in National Geographic. You don't read a lot of National Geographic stories for kids that are aimed at that are talking about
Soil bacteria,
exactly the soil bacteria.
dung beetles. I blame nature shows. I really do. So when I was 6 years old, I said, I want to study tigers in India. And when I was 16 years old, I said, I want to study tigers in India. And, every kind of point in my journey, but particularly when I transitioned into graduate school, where I had the ability to really kind of narrow in a bit and become more focused in my research. I was still interested in charismatic megafauna because that's where my passion was sparked. And I guess I had a little bit of audacity. I had heard plenty of academic advisors say, like, you can't study the charismatic megafauna because they've been studied. There aren't new research questions. There isn't room to kind of get in. And it's not, I believed them. I really did. But I always thought to myself, like, well, I'm going to ask. I mean, like, I don't want to dedicate my life to something else. Like I will do it. I always felt like, of course, if someone tells me, like, no, you cannot do this, it's impossible, you tried, like, you can't do gorillas, everyone studied gorillas, they're all studied out, there's no room. I would choose the second most interesting to me. But by some amazing grace of the universe, after I spent part of my undergraduate studies, working in East Africa, mainly getting to know zebras and wildebeest and elephants and lions and all of that. When I went into graduate school at the Yale School of the Environment, I put on my application, like, lions. I spent some time in places where there are lions. They're amazing. They need our help. I want to study lions. And I had an advisor who, said, okay, gotta shape up your research project. What's it going to be on? And I said, can it be on lions? And she, and her response was like, maybe. Let's see if there are research opportunities for you to join a project, that's already ongoing in East Africa, on lions. And there was. And because I asked, I spent a couple of years living and working in Tanzania on a lion project and becoming like a real, actual bona fide ecologist that studied lions. And then moving into my PhD, at that point, I knew, hey, carnivore ecology is a whole field. And, there's lots of carnivores, there's lots of similarities that, land based carnivores have and share. I want to keep doing carnivores. And so I actually transitioned to studying North American bears. Um, and in general, that has been my thing. And so I don't want to make it sound like it was easy, because it was not easy for me, and I do not think it's going to be easy for anyone out there to decide, like, I want to be known for studying, the most charismatic animals in the world. But the truth of my experience is that I asked people. I didn't make it happen myself. I didn't open those doors myself. Like I that's wasn't possible for me. But I did tell the folks I knew, the professors that I knew, what I wanted to study and why, and they were willing to help me get there.
One of my favorite professors in college, and this is really more relevant to writing, but I think there's a bit of a connection. Used to tell me that when it comes to writing, if you're going to sin boldly. And
Hmm.
I think that really ties in nicely to what you're talking about with the audaciousness of being willing to say no. I mean, you can tell me that I can't do these things, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to at least ask the question, because the worst question is the one that you don't ask, right?
It's true. And I have to say, because so much of my experience has been rooted in academia, with becoming a carnivore, a large carnivore ecologist, the bears and the lions and the wolves and, all of them, comes this education on ecosystems, and how carnivores are linked to every other organism in an ecosystem, down to the soil bacteria, down to the invertebrates, down to, all of the less charismatic animals that still need conservation protection, or maybe need it even more. So in my opinion, being a good, bear conservationist, lion conservationist also means advocating for the fullness of the biodiversity in the spaces where they live.
Trickle down conservation.
Yeah. Hopefully just trickle everywhere, trickle all over, trickle out, down, up, back and forth, left and right.
I want to bridge the world of academia with your current role as the co-host of Wild Kingdom. So we have been discussing your obviously very stellar academic credentials, but I do want to know: is there ever surprise, I guess, that you have this pedigree that you do, and this, you're bona fide, as you mentioned. Is it surprising to people that you have this background in legitimate science as the co-host of this show? Because I feel like there could easily be an assumption on a lot of people's parts that you're just reading off a script, for lack of a better phrase.
That's a great question. I have to say, I have not had bad experiences as the host of this show. I'm very happy to say. Every so often, I'll get someone asking me, like, why do they call you Dr. Ray? On the show, and I'll explain, like, oh, because I have a PhD in
A lot of
wildlife
work.
ecology. Yeah, like that's why. But I'll actually answer your question from a whole different angle. So less about how it impacts me, but really about, like, a misperception that I had going into it. So, like I was explaining before, as a kid, I really thought, like, all of these nature show hosts on TV must have their doctorates. Like, they must have gone to school for ages to get this expertise in wildlife. I mean, they were all adults. They were all, like, just tremendously, intelligent, and, just seemed like they had all this information in their heads, and they're passionate. So my assumption, not knowing their journey, was that they had also gone to school and graduate school and become, like, the best top expert in wildlife ecology. And at that point, they were eligible to host a nature show. I really, truly, truly believed that. And it was actually when I was I'd already signed my contract for Wild Kingdom, and I was getting ready for one of my first interviews about my role. And I wanted to really pay homage to so many of the nature show hosts who'd come before me. And I was researching them. I was, like, Googling their bios and their backgrounds. And I was putting together this list, and I realized, wait a second, nobody even went to grad school. Like they, many, 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 if not all of these folks, absolutely went to college, and most, studied some kind of science. But I realized that I just made an assumption about people I didn't know and about their paths. And, we all know what happens when you make an assumption. And not to say that I would have taken a different path had I known that, or that I wasted my time. I don't believe that at all. But essentially, to answer your question, like, I really thought you had to earn the role of wildlife show host through becoming an expertise in science, because these were presenting science. And I didn't realize that the most important part of being a nature show host is being an excellent science communicator. That's what you need. You could do that through having a lot of experience in education, or you could do that by like natural, talent and skills. You could do it from growing up in nature and just like chit chatting with family members or mentors about it. I mean, there's so many different ways that a person can become an incredibly skilled host or science communicator, not just this one way. So my mind was blown. I mean, I absolutely had this moment where I was like, oh my gosh, am I the first nature show host with a PhD? Yes, you know? But then after that, I realized like, wow, really good for these guys. Like, really good for these guys, because they had me fooled. Like, they have done such an incredible job at being sharp and, you know, just knowledgeable and charismatic themselves. And, they made me fall in love with science without them necessarily being like bona fide scientists themselves. So I've really learned that lesson.
The Tennessee Aquarium's podcast Aquatic is made possible by support from the Tennessee Conservationist, the official magazine of Tennessee state parks. Each issue is filled with fascinating stories about Tennessee's native species, rich history, and unique culture. It's also your guide to exploring state parks and planning your next outdoor adventure. Subscribe today at tnconservationist.org. So, what then is at the root of your skill as a science communicator? Because you are, I mean, having watched clips of the show and just listening to the podcast, you clearly have the knack. So, how did you learn to do that? Because you went to school to study the science. How do you learn to be a science communicator?
Oh, well, thank you so much. That is very, very kind. Those compliments are very kind. People do ask me that question. They're like, wait, you never studied communications? Like why does it come naturally to you? There's just something chit chatty about me. I'm pretty extroverted, I will say. I love to chit chat. Um, in my academic career, I really found that because of where I come from, because of the community I represent, let's just say like urban Black folks in America is my community. I was very frequently like bringing home information, right? So like I go off and spend a summer studying lions, or spend, a winter, crawling into bear dens. And my boyfriend's husbands, cousins, brothers, mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, grandparents, best friends, their husbands and cousins, like everyone wants to know what I'm doing. What is this? Why? Like we've never known someone from our community to do this work. And so instead of giving like some like super jargony, highly technical explanation of the ecology of what I was doing, I've spent many years now, essentially 20 years, translating what I'm interested and what I do for research to my community. And that was not only good practice, it was also super fun. Like it's really fun. I'm lucky. It's fun to talk about bears and lions, to anybody, but especially to people I love. And so I really believe that I became sharp and honestly like lost the nerves. Like really I'm shaking my arms right now. You can obviously no one listening can see this, but like really loosey goosey about it, that just very casual. I was able to adopt a casual, rhetoric for talking about complex scientific topics because it was important to me to not abandon my community as I grew in expertise. And that's still something that I cherish. I still really, really, really aim most of my science communication work towards people like me when I was a kid, people like me when I was a teenager, people like the communities that I have come from.
So a phrase that I like to that I've used a lot in the course of hosting this show is that science can't exist in a vacuum.
Mm.
It's sort of meaningless in a vacuum where the only people who know about the science are scientists. And I think people, when they think about science, don't really consider how important it is that science communication does exist because people can't care about things they don't know about. And the
Mm.
important role that science communicators play is to serve as that liaison between the academic community, many of whom are not able to speak to the layperson. And a science communicator almost works like a translator, right? You're taking the science and you're making it digestible and meaningful to people who are not out there doing the work and giving them the context to understand why that work matters and why it's important. And I'm curious, clearly these kinds of shows had a tremendous impact on you. How do you feel like programs like Wild Kingdom and other programs move the needle when it comes to conservation and the general public's understanding of the natural world and the challenges that a lot of natural ecosystems and species face?
Yeah, Wild Kingdom has this incredible legacy of where it's come from. And at the same time, being a part of the show today, it's a very different world than when the show debuted in 1963. And arguably, conservation issues in many ways are more pressing, than ever. And I'm really proud of networks like NBC for continuing to invest in educational and informational programming, right? There's in 1963, there were not that many TV shows like that you could choose from. Today, you can watch so many things. There's too much to watch, even just for kids or families. There is so much content all of the time on your phone, on your computer, on your television, on your iPad. I mean, there's so much to choose from. And I really value that Wild Kingdom remains committed to being highly factual, to being conservation focused. So it's not a wildlife show that is sensational, right? We're not showing you like the biggest great white shark and, how it's ripping apart, a person's boat. We are showing you the great white sharks that we're able to find in this certain habitat and teaching families about that habitat, the conservation issues, and the people working on it. So I hope you could tell like how much I love this show. It is just so committed to education and in a fun way, so it's not like a lecture, like, or you're going on an adventure to, with us, we're gonna go to the Arctic Circle and learn about polar bears, right? But again, there isn't like a violin playing with the sad song of, polar bears. It's not trying to be heart-wrenching. It's trying to be educational and empowering to our viewers so that they both know what's going on and then feel empowered that there is a career path there. There are people working every single day on these issues, and there's room for more people to join them. And that's what our show does. And I think we're the only show that does it like that. And it's really, really cool.
I want to know what it felt like, given that we've talked about your lifelong love of these kinds of programs. When you got the call that you had been chosen to co-host this
Mm.
program, because I mean, for you, literally, this sounds like life's mission fulfilled. Like you
Yeah.
were checking
Yes.
the biggest box that you
My
had
life dream.
as a kid. So how did that feel? I mean, who did you tell first, and what was your reaction to the news?
Gosh, it still feels surreal. It really still. I'm several years into co-hosting the show and it still feels surreal. I still can't believe it. Um, but I remember exactly where I was when I got the phone call. And I guess the thing that I should really say to set the stage is that I don't want to say given up on the dream, but I had really put it down. So, I at some point in my, mid 30s, when I was like very much into, my mid-career journey as a researcher, I was doing science communication with some things I had built myself. I was working on a book and I had a, hit podcast and was using social media and doing a lot of public speaking and felt like, you know what? I'm not hosting my own nature show, but this is great. I'm really satisfied with this. I'm so glad that my dream of hosting a nature show has gotten me to this place. And certainly there's no way it's going to happen at this point, but wow, I'm really happy with where I am. And like if the rest of my career looks like this, I've made it. So I spent years with that feeling and just not thinking that a nature show would come my way and being totally okay with that. And I was surprised to be contacted by Mutual of Omaha. I was surprised. I didn't know a single person at that organization. I did not apply for this. I didn't audition. I did not know that the show was coming back. Out of, to me, what seemed like the blue, I was contacted and invited to appear as a guest on what they're calling their pilot season. So before it was properly picked up by NBC. Um, and I thought, this is a one-off thing. Yeah, of course I'll be a guest on Wild Kingdom. Are you kidding me? The show I watched as a kid? Absolutely. They were doing a bear episode with Peter Gros, who is the host. And, of course I bargained for a little money, but I thought to myself, I will do this for free. I'm not going to negotiate too hard. And I appeared as a guest on one of their episodes for their pilot season and just thought like, oh my gosh, this is the, like probably the best thing I will have ever done in my career. And then I just also put that away. And about a year passed and they called me back and asked if I'd be willing to co-host the show since it had been picked up by NBC, and to co-host with Peter Gros. And I was standing in my office at the university where I work. And I just remember standing, not sitting, and trying not to sound like too eager as I was like jumping up and down. And, I called my husband first to let him know. And I just remember like standing there for a while and just essentially in disbelief. And that the disbelief still hits me a lot. It's pretty amazing that although I positioned myself, I didn't completely position myself for this. And it's an incredible honor of my life.
You mentioned earlier that one of your favorite things when you were doing your research was taking that information back to your community and basically doing what you're doing now on a smaller scale. How does it feel to have the opportunity to kind of slake that love for sharing the natural world with other people, but on a literal national or international scale? Does that passion scale up to something that size?
Oh, it's so fun. I mean, it's like what a blessing to have fun at work. It's so, so fun. And, it's one of the reasons it's fun is yes, because I'm, sharing this information on this. It's actually now an international scale because we are on Telemundo, so all across Latin America as well. But also, I really have had so many, I'm fortunate to have had so many experiences studying so many different wildlife species around the world. But this show takes me really around the world and really gets me to learn about all kinds of wild animals that I wasn't familiar with. So, this pertains to the Tennessee Aquarium. I have been a terrestrial ecologist. All the lions and all the bears, all the primates that I've studied, like don't go swimming. And so this show, Wild Kingdom, has gotten me in the water. It has gotten me diving. It has gotten me snorkeling. It has gotten me, like in marine spaces, in deep ocean, deep open ocean and beaches and, diving into river systems, all over the place. And so it's truly like I'm getting this second education. It's almost like a renaissance that I'm having where I am getting this whole second education of learning about all the other wild animals that I didn't deeply study as an academic. And now I get to do it for work. So really, I truly believe that the public is benefiting from this show, but also know that I am benefiting a whole lot too. Just my brain is just buzzing all the time with new info.
I'm naturally just a curious person, and learning something new every day is my favorite part about my job too. And I feel like just like you, learning about aquatic life, about the other animals that we showcase in our living collection, the work that our scientists are doing. I feel like I'm constantly learning. So I completely understand what you mean when you say that, just the joy of feeling like you're a student again. Because I mean, how many people who are science communicators or who just loved being a student wish that they could have just stayed in school forever, and jobs like yours and in a sense like mine let us do that while also getting a paycheck, which is kind of the best of both worlds.
It's really, I mean, I'm so fortunate. I just can't say it enough. I highly recommend it.
For a lot of people, they're seeing someone in you who you didn't benefit from seeing growing up. There's a phrase that we often talk about here in our office, that and we heard it at a conference, that if I don't see me, it's not for me. You were strong enough willed to see past that and see yourself in this field, even if you didn't see someone like yourself doing the thing that you were so passionate about. How does it feel, and does it weigh heavily on you, or do you feel a lot of pressure as a woman of color to be doing this role, knowing that for a lot of people you could be their Neil deGrasse Tyson, you could be their Jacques Cousteau? How does that sit with you?
I take it very seriously. I really, really do. And I hope that's the case, mostly because, our show isn't in classrooms, right? It's not homework. It is something that people can passively watch. It's fun. There's no test, there's no evaluation. You don't have to memorize anything. It should just be a really fun show. And what I take very seriously is being responsible for helping, especially young people, realize that they want to be a scientist or that they love science through this, really engaging and fun way. Right now, most science is rooted in, traditional academia, which is like being tested and evaluated and all these kind of intimidating things. And I really love being able to represent science in like a very laid back, just passive way. I want you to sit on your couch and eat your favorite snack and cuddle up with your pet and watch the show and think to yourself, I want to learn more science. I want to be a scientist. Like, she's happy doing what she does. Maybe I can be happy doing that too. And there's a lot of reasons. One is that there is, like you mentioned, like this huge discrepancy between like who is in the media as a scientist, right? Women, people of color, women of color are largely absent. But in the workplace, that is also reflected. And then we have these huge problems to solve, right? like planet Earth really needs all kinds of people engaging in helping to solve our problems because we've had a largely dominant demographic of people working to solve the problems, and we still got these problems. So it would be really nice if folks were empowered and felt belonging, in these spaces. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a nature show host, but I did not know that that was science. I didn't know that I wanted to know science, to be a scientist. I didn't know that I wanted to present science. And so I believe that there's lots of young, let's just say like young Black girls out there like I was, who don't know that they love science, who don't know that they want to be a scientist, who don't know that science is for them. And what I really hope that I'm able to do is to like plant that seed just by them seeing me in the space, just by, folks doing a little double take. I get feedback every so often that that's happening. I do get, there aren't children on social media, hopefully, but I do get parents who reach out to me on social media and say, we watch your show and I literally get parents DM me to say like, my daughter, my son said, I didn't know Black folks did this. I didn't know like Black folks were in nature. I didn't know Black folks studied wild animals. I didn't know Black folks swam with sharks. I didn't know Black folks did all this stuff. And and that matters. And the parents like take the effort to find me on social media, to send me a message saying, thank you for expanding our worldview, for showing our kids and this next generation that Black folks belong in these spaces and in leadership, right? Like, not just low levels, but literally in leadership positions here. I take this very, very seriously. And that's also part of why it's such an honor to be co-hosting this show, is because it's not just the show, it is the societal impact that doing this might just have.
As you look forward to the show's future, the whole world literally is a source of potential topics for you to cover, of stories to tell. What are stories that you're excited that you're going to be telling, or that are maybe on your hit list of things that you'd like to tackle with the show? And can you give us any kind of insight into how much of a input you or Peter have in shaping the kinds of stories that are being told on the show?
Yeah, I'm so fortunate that Peter Gros, my co-host, and I are highly engaged with the production. There is a big team of people. I mean, talk about invisible folks who work their butts off. The team that is, producing and creating Wild Kingdom do not get nearly enough applause because they are making this hit show. But it is truly a team effort. And what is very clear is that there are a lot of people with expertise in making television, unscripted television or educational television. And there are people like me. I'm the only scientist on the team. And there are people like Peter. He's the only nature show host on the team, like long-term veteran nature show host on the team. So all of us actually really lean on each other to bring stories, to develop the stories, to pivot when we need to. There's a lot of pivoting, mostly on set. I'm using air quotes because set is like, a bear den or whatever it is. But there's a lot of, it's not a scripted show. We are just explaining and discussing what we know, what we see when we're there. So that requires folks who know a lot about camera angles, and audio, folks who know a lot about like the beats of a story, people like Peter who know a lot about like how to draw out the right information from, a guest expert who maybe is shy or maybe is like a little too verbose, people like me who know like maybe the full ecology of an ecosystem. It's really fun to work on this show because everyone is empowered. And in terms of what I'm looking forward to, we have just wrapped season 3 of Wild Kingdom, which is really exciting. Season 3 will debut on television October 4th. In the meantime, season 2 is still playing every Saturday on NBC, streaming on Peacock. And so season 3 is going to be really amazing. I mean, we went again around the world, some really amazing highlights from our trips to Australia, Puerto Rico, some just incredible footage of doing almost emergency level work with Mexican gray wolves, spider monkey rescues at the US-Mexico border. I mean, just really amazing, amazing content. And I know that in the future, hopefully the near future, our show will travel to Africa. And I don't know if it'll be East Africa. My fingers are crossed because, again, those are some of the countries where I really began my wildlife career. And it would be extra full circle to be able to tell some of those stories from the landscapes there.
Like a homecoming, an academic homecoming.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, let's wrap things up by talking a little bit about going wild. Again, I I started listening to the show today. I was listening to your episode about Carolina Landa, who became enamored with nature and sustainability while she was incarcerated. And I was just so engrossed. And I love the emphasis that you have on the show about the human drama behind saving animals. And here at the Aquarium, all of our storytelling is focused on our campus and our work within a not insubstantial swath of the world. I mean, we cover the Southeast, and a lot of our work is in the Southeast. But you have the whole of the planet to pull from when you're talking about these kinds of stories that you can tell on your show. So, how do you find these people? And then once you find them, how do you pick from the amazing stories that you could tell for an episode of Going Wild?
Oh, thank you so much. I could talk forever about this podcast. I'm so proud of my podcast. It's called Going Wild with Dr. Rae Wynn-Grant. It's in collaboration with PBS Nature, so public media that we just need to keep supporting. This is another place where the team that you don't see and you don't hear the voices of behind Going Wild is top notch. And it's the reason that we have been an award-winning podcast. We, exist at the top 1% of all podcasts because of just the nuances that you get in it. We work together. We do these retreats at the beginning of each season to figure out which guests are we going to aim for? Is there a theme here? We just wrapped season 4, which is what you were listening to. And that was our first season where we expanded beyond scientists. We expanded, I guess, our definition of what a scientist is to include many people who really are engaged in a type of activism. And Carolina's story is one of my favorites because there are so many, hundreds of thousands of individuals in this country, and then, millions around the world who are incarcerated and are often voiceless. And even I had to learn about the wildlife conservation work being done by our incarcerated brothers and sisters in America. And in some ways, they are making tremendous change in endangered species conservation. And those stories needed to be told. And so Carolina's is one that it's there's struggle, there's heartbreak, and essentially there's this triumph there. And so I'm just so grateful that she was willing to speak. She wasn't the first person that we contacted. There were actually a couple of people we contacted who didn't feel comfortable sharing their stories. Being incarcerated is very personal. A lot of people have a lot of trauma around what happened to them in the systems. And so she was someone who was willing to say, you know what? I love this podcast. These stories are important. It's all about wildlife and conservation, but it's also about who's doing that work and how we can help each other and know more about each other and support that. So anyway, just all praise goes to the Going Wild team. For anyone listening to this podcast, you can listen to Going Wild wherever you get your podcasts, and I hope you love it.
Being trusted with that kind of story is one of the real gold star moments for communicators. I know as a former journalist that whenever someone trusted me with a story that was inherently going to put them in a place of vulnerability, being trusted with that is something that I never took for granted. And it's always like the ultimate fulfillment of your job as a storyteller to have them tell you at the end of it that they feel like you did a good job, that their trust was well placed. And I'm assuming that was probably the case with Carolina too.
I think so. She connected with one of our producers several times. Many, many meetings and emails and conversations before it even got to me establishing that relationship. And so, just really grateful for how it worked out. And we have season 5 coming.
How can people find out more of the kinds of things that you're doing, whether that's Going Wild or Wild Kingdom or any of the other projects, the book that you've written? How can people find out what's going on with Dr. Rae?
Yes, I have my book is called Wild Life. It's available wherever you get your books. You can find me on social media. All of my handles are the same, at Rae Wynn-Grant. I have a website, but watch the television show, Wild Kingdom, Protecting the Wild, Saturday mornings on NBC.
Dr. Rae, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It was a real just pleasure to speak with you and find out more about your inroad to becoming a science communicator, the legacy of Wild Kingdom, your incredible experiences in Africa and just in the world of academia. And I'm sure that you probably inspired a lot of people, hopefully, who are listening to the show and every Saturday, like you said, on Wild Kingdom. So really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much, Casey.
All right. If you have an idea for a future episode of the Podcast Aquatic, do send it along to podcast@tnaqua.org. While you're online, go ahead and write us a review or leave us a rating. Those are free and easy ways to support the show by giving us better play with the algorithm, which lets more people hear us. And in the meantime, until next time, remember that every drop matters.